Hey boys and girls, I am so excited to share with you today one of my very favorite books. The title of this book is called Bubba, the Cowboy Prince. It is a fractured Texas tale. Since we've been talking about fairy tales this week, I wanted to choose one of my favorite fairy tales, although it is a fractured fairy tale. So we know that that simply means that they've taken a story that was somewhat of a traditional fairy tale and they've turned it into something with a little different version. So it's written a little differently, and I bet you'll pick up pretty quickly on the version that we're looking at. So this week our focus and our target has been to focus on sequencing and looking at the character and the setting and the plot. So when you finish listening to the story today, you're going to have an activity that you need to finish on Schoology that should say Bubba the Cowboy Prince, and it should say sequencing, so you can follow that on your Schoology account. So let's get started, and I'll do my best to show you the pictures while I read. It's written by Helen Kettleman and James Wallahall is who illustrated it. So dedication page here says, to my right sisters, Anne, Diane, Kirby, Marsh, Mary, Tricia, and Vivian, with thanks and love, and to Mary with love and thanks to my fairy god cow. Once a strapping young fella named Bubba lived on a ranch with his wicked stepdaddy and his hateful and lazy stepbrothers, Dwayne and Milton. Bubba's stepdaddy spoiled Dwayne and Milton to no end, but Bubba worked from sun up to sundown doing the chores of 3 ranch hands. Bubba never complained, though. He loved ranching. This is Bubba here on the horse. And this is the wicked stepdaddy over here with his brothers, Dwayne and Milton. Dwayne and Milton spent their days sitting on horseback, bossing Bubba around. Get them doggies along there, Bubba, ordered Dwayne. Yeah, and watch out for them cow patties, added Milton. You know how Daddy hates for you to track up the house. So here they are, just sitting on their horse, bossing everybody around, and here's Bubba doing all the work. Poor Bubba. Now, Miss Lurleen, who lived down the road a piece, was the purtiest and the richest gal in the county, and she owned the biggest spread west of the Brazos. And she loved ranching too. But it was lonesome work, and after a while, she decided it was time for some companionship. I aim to find myself a fellow, she said, one who loves ranching as much as I do, and it wouldn't hurt if he was as cute as a cow's ear either. Miss Lurleen decided to throw a ball. She sent invitations to all the ranchers in Texas. And here's Miss Lurleen. You can see her butler there. Soon the day of the ball arrived. Milton and Dwayne spent all day getting gussied up in their finest duds. Bubba about ran himself ragged waiting on them. Bubba, shouted Dwayne. Fetch my bolo tie. Bubba, shouted Milton. Get my boots polished. Bubba, shouted his wicked stepdaddy, brush them horses and wash that wagon. Here he is, Bubba doing all the work. Just all them bossing him around all the time. Poor old Bubba. By the time Dwayne and Milton and their wicked daddy were ready to go, Bubba was exhausted. Still, as they climbed into the wagon, Bubba asked, Can't you wait for me to get ready? I want to dance with Miss Lurleen too. Dwayne and Milton and their wicked stepdaddy hooted and hollered. Why, you're sorrier than a steer in a stockyard, said Dwayne. Can you imagine Miss Lurleen dancing with the likes of you? Said Milton. Miss Lurleen wouldn't even wipe the dirt clods off her boots with that raggedy shirt of yours, and you smell more like the cattle than the cattle do. Poor Bubba, all he wants to do is go to the ball. And they think that's a real funny. Bubba took a look at himself. It was true. He didn't have a decent shirt to wear. His boots were downright disgraceful. And he did smell a bit rough. Milton and Dwayne were right. Miss Lurleen wouldn't dance with the likes of him. Bubba hung his head. He felt lower than a rattlesnake in a gully. Milton and Dwayne and their wicked daddy went on off to the ball. Bubba mounted his horse and headed for the pasture to check on the herd. The sky was getting darker than a black bull at midnight. It looked like a Texas thunderstorm was brewing. Here he is. Milton and Dwayne and Daddy have gone to the ball, but here he is, just a-waiting on this Texas thunderstorm a-brewing. Bubba had just arrived at the cow pasture when a bolt of lightning struck, knocking him off his boots, and his horse, rather. Bubba was stunned for a moment, but when he picked himself up, he heard a voice. "Go to the ball, Bubba," said the voice. Bubba looked around. No one was there except for him and the cows. Here are all everything lightning struck. Now, Bubba figured he'd bonk the bejeebers out of his bean because the voice was coming from a cow. Look at here. She chewed her cud for a moment and then she said, "I'm your fairy god cow and I can help you go to the ball." Bubba sat up, rubbing his head. "I'd like to go, Miss God Cow, but shoot, I don't have nothing to wear." And the fairy god cow swished her tail and Bubba's raggedy clothes changed into the handsomest cowboy duds he'd ever laid eyes on. His jeans were crisp, his boots were shiny, his shirt was dazzling, and his Stetson was whiter than a new salt lick. "Why, I look downright purty," said Bubba. Here's his fairy god cow. Ooh, and look at Bubba. Doesn't he clean up nice? Some pretty boots and a nice hat. The fairy god cow swished her tail again, and a nearby steer turned into the most beautiful white stallion Bubba had ever seen. "Now you go off to the ball, Bubba, and have a good time dancing with Miss Lurleen. But you'd best be home by midnight, 'cause that's when the magic runs out." "Yahoo!" shouted Bubba as he jumped on the white horse and galloped off to the ball. So she took that ugly horse and turned it into a nice, big, pretty white horse that Bubba could go to the ball. When Bubba arrived, the hoedown was in full swing, but every time Miss Lurleen finished a dance, she yawned. "There goes another $10 Stetson on a 5-cent head," she complained. "Where are all the real cowboys?" By the time it was Bubba's turn to dance with Miss Lurleen, it was almost midnight. As soon as she saw Bubba, Miss Lurleen's eyes lit up. "Ooh, why, you're as cute as a cow's ears," she said. Bubba blushed, then took Miss Lurleen in his arms and started dancing. Dwayne and Milton turned purple with jealousy. "Who's that dude?" said Dwayne. "I don't recollect seeing him before, but he looks a mite familiar," said Milton. "Do something," said their wicked daddy. "That cowboy is winning Miss Lurleen's heart." There they are, all mad because they don't know it, but that's Bubba dancing with Miss Lurleen. As it turned out, Milton and Dwayne didn't have to do a thing because Bubba and Miss Lurleen were in the middle of do-si-doing when the clock struck midnight. Suddenly, Bubba's fine duds turned into the dirty rags he usually wore around the ranch, and he looked sorry and he smelled worse. "What is that awful smell?" said Milton. "Why, it's Bubba," shouted Dwayne. Bubba turned 14 shades of red, apologized to Miss Lurleen, and ran out of the room. "Wait!" she yelled, chasing after him. So here he is, all turned back into the old Bubba, looking pretty rough, smelling even worse. But Bubba didn't wait. He jumped on his cow and lumbered off into the night, and in the ruckus he lost one of his dirty cowboy boots. Miss Lurleen clasped it in her arms. "This is the boot of a real cowboy, and the man I want to marry, and I aim to find him." Miss Lurleen went back inside, and though she asked everybody at the ball, nobody knew who the mysterious cowboy was. Nobody except for Dwayne and Milton and their wicked daddy. That is, but they weren't talking. So here she is, watching Bubba go off into the moonlight, and nobody knows who he is. Well, they do, but they won't tell. The next day, Miss Lurleen went from ranch to ranch looking for the cowboy who owned the boot, and then she came to Dwayne and Milton's ranch. Both brothers tried the boot on, but it didn't fit. Miss Lurleen had just climbed on her horse to leave when Bubba rode up. He was dirty and sweaty and smelly from working with the cows, and he was only wearing one boot. There they are trying to force it on. And here's Bubba. He shows up and he's only got on one boot. Miss Lurleen jumped off her horse and ran over to Bubba. "Try this on," she cried. Bubba took his dirty old boot and pulled it on. "Much obliged, ma'am," he said, blushing. It fit perfectly. "You're my prince and cowboy boots," shouted Miss Lurleen. "I'd recognize that smell anywhere. Marry me, cowboy, and help me work my ranch." Dwayne and Milton and their wicked daddy threw chicken fits. There they are. The boot fits old Bubba. Of course, they're over here having a fit because they don't want him to marry her. But Bubba just smiled, and he and Miss Lurleen rode off into the sunset, and they lived happily ever after, roping and cowpoking and getting them doggies along. All right, so now you're going to finish the sequencing activity that goes along with this book, and I hope that you have figured out the fractured tale from the original fairy tale, which was Cinderella. You got it. So as you're working through this today, remember to think about the order of events of the story, and you can always watch the video again and scroll back in order to figure that out. Bye guys, have a good one.